Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, social marketers around the world. My name is Win Morgan, and as president of the International Social Marketing Association, it's both my privilege and pleasure to introduce the 21st in a series of webinars designed to advance social marketing teaching, research, and practice. I'm here today with Jay Kassir, our organizer of the webinar series and chair of the ISMA membership committee of our board of directors. Jay, how you doing?
I'm pleased to be here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Great. And we also have Tamara Harbour, our webinar moderator, with us today. Tamara, how are you doing today?
I'm just fine. I hope everyone else is fine too.
Now we've got a wonderful webinar coming up for you. We'll begin in just a moment, but before we do, just a couple of quick announcements. I want to make sure that you mark your calendars for the World Social Marketing Conference, which is going to be held in the United States in Washington, D.C., 16th and 17th May 2017. It's going to be a great event, and we do hope that you can come. Of course, there's a discount for ISMA members being offered at this time, and the call for papers has been extended to October 6th. Just go to WSMconference.com/Washington-DC-2017, or better yet, just go to WSMconference.com and follow the links to register and to submit your call for papers. So the early bird rate has been extended for you until December 30th, so it's a good time to go in now, because after they've got a certain number of people signed up, then they're going to discontinue the early bird. So I would get in so that you get in not just before the deadline, but so that you get in before the line of people gets too full. The second thing we want to let you know about is the ISMA calendar. You know there's an event calendar for ISMA on our website, and Jay and his friends keep it up to date. If you want to know what's going on in the world of social marketing, or if you want to share with us what's going on in the world of social marketing, go over to our website at i-socialmarketing.org, click on events, and take a look. Now I'd like to turn the webinar over to our moderator, Tamara Harbour. Tamara?
Okay,
I'm giving it to Tamara.
I have a little bridge leading into Tamara, so let me go ahead and do that first, if you don't mind. So thank you, Win, and welcome, everyone. I want to remind you that if there is more than one of you, your location, we'd appreciate it if you would let us know how many you are. One of you have done that. Win, maybe you can help Andrea, who apparently
doing that already.
Audio, okay, great. So there's a couple of you who haven't told us how many are at your location. We'd appreciate if you would do that. And we're going to do it a little differently today than usual because we have a relatively small group. We're going to take questions as we go along. So if you have questions, go ahead and use the chat box and put into the chat box the question. And as soon as Sonny gets a chance where it makes sense to stop, she will, and she'll answer your question at that point, and we'll keep on going. So don't wait. Go ahead, put your questions in as they come to you, and she'll take them when she can. And I'm going to skip the polls that we sometimes do at the beginning and go right into the introduction of our speaker today. And in order to do that, it's my pleasure to ask Tamara to do the introduction.
All right. Thank you, Jay. And it is my pleasure to welcome our speaker today, who is Sonny Knott. Sonny Knott is a senior transportation planner at King County Metro, which is in Washington State in the U.S. She's worked there for 11 years. She manages the In Motion program at Metro, which is a community-based social marketing program focused on reducing drive-alone travel. She also works at the University of Washington on their UPass program and is the president of the local chapter of the Association for Commuter Transportation. So she obviously has lots of experience in this field. In her spare time, Sonny enjoys spending time with her family and getting outdoors. I've heard this presentation already once, and I know how interesting it it's going to be for everyone, so let's get started. We're all looking forward to hearing about the InMotion program. Sonny, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Tamara, and thanks for listening in, everybody. I am happy to be sharing the InMotion story as part of the ISMA webinar series. And so I'll just give you a brief overview of what I'll cover in the presentation. I'm going to provide some background on the InMotion program and its origin. I'll talk about the social marketing techniques that we use and how we apply them. I'll walk you through the project development steps that we take for each of our projects. And then I'll talk about some more recent initiatives that we are working on, including motivational interviewing. And finally, I'll wrap up with some program results. So first, I just want to give you a little bit of background about the place that I work, which is King County. So King County is the most populous county in Washington State and includes large cities like Seattle, in addition to a lot of suburban areas and rural areas. It's a really diverse or large geographic area covering 2,000 square miles, and about 2 million people live in King County. All of these different neighborhoods have a really wide range of service levels, both in terms of the businesses that they have access to for kind of those local biking and walking trips, and also in terms of just the transportation infrastructure that it's available to them. That includes transit service, varying levels of transit service, sidewalk availability, and on-street and off-street bike facilities. And I guess to give you a bit of background on why we got interested in the residential market, we've had a long history of working with employers on reducing commute trip, drive alone travel, and that was as a result of our commute to production law that was passed in 1991. And we saw a big decrease in that commute drive alone mode share. And as a result of that commute to production law, we've had a lot of historical emphasis on work trips. But as you can see from this graph, non-work trips are really important too. Work trips are a pretty significant portion, but all of those non-work trips together account for 80% of all trips. And so we felt it was really important to start focusing on the residential side of things. And that's really where the InMotion program came from. So InMotion began in 2004, and it's a community or neighborhood-based program that uses social marketing techniques to reduce drive alone travel, as was mentioned in my introduction. And since 2004, we have implemented projects in 38 different neighborhoods throughout King County, and those neighborhoods have varied quite a bit. We've, in terms of their makeup, we have implemented projects in urban neighborhoods, both single family and multifamily. We've implemented projects in suburban areas and rural areas. And the projects that we've implemented, in those projects we've had nearly 25,000 residents participate in the program. And typically we target about a 10% response rate, and we usually reach that target. And the chart that you see up there on the right is a compilation of pre and post survey results. This is self-reported data that shows prior to participating in an InMotion program or when they're signing up, we ask them a question about how they get around. And then at the end of the project, so about 3 to 4 months later, we ask them in our post survey how they get around. And so this is comparing that change from the pre to post survey. And as you can see, the drive alone rate has decreased, and the use of all the other modes of transportation have increased. And this pattern is pretty consistent across our different projects, and has been this pattern has been a really great way of getting our management on board and continuing to support the In Motion program. So I'll just walk you through kind of a basic In Motion framework. We're talking with people in their home environment on the residential side of things, and we're talking with them about, and we're really trying to focus on trips that they can make in their neighborhood. So focusing on local trips, those trips to parks and to community destinations, to the local business district. And we are multimodal, so we are a transit agency. We're interested in getting more people to ride transit, but we're not exclusively talking about transit. We're also focusing on walking and biking trips and carpooling, and really whatever works for the neighborhood that we're doing outreach to. The materials that we developed are really geared towards those individual needs, individual barriers and motivators that we hear about when we do outreach to the community and talking with them about the design of the program. And we're looking to lower that barrier to entry, the barrier to making behavior change, by providing them with relevant information like this neighborhood map that you see on the right, and information about the modes of travel that they are interested in. So we're trying not to overwhelm them with a whole bunch of extraneous information and just provide them with what they're interested in. And then we also provide rewards that are really linked to the behavior that we are trying to change. So one of our most popular rewards is a transit fare card that we offer. Our smart card is called an Orca card. We offer that as with some amount of trips on it as one of the rewards for people who take a pledge to drive less. We're also creating goals that are really kind of incremental and don't feel too overwhelming. So we're asking people to reduce or change to 1 or 2 drive alone trips per week to some other way of getting around. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about some of the social marketing techniques that we use, but just want to go into a little bit more detail. And we're really kind of trying to move people along the behavior change continuum. Probably most of you are kind of familiar with social marketing techniques since we're talking to an ISMA audience, but we're trying to move people into action, into kind of the action or maintenance modes. And so we talk with the community and we talk with stakeholders to identify those neighborhood-specific motivators, barriers, and benefits to driving less. Some barriers that we hear about are like personal safety can come up, particularly in neighborhoods that are seen as less safe. So other barriers that can come up are availability of transit service, either perceived availability or real lack of options. Other barriers are, other motivators might be, let me just talk about motivators, I guess. Other motivators might be the cost of driving. So cost can be a motivation for people if we're able to reduce their costs. Environmental comes up. Personal health comes up a lot. So talking to people about the benefits of walking within their community to their health can help. But really, and those are themes that come up, but they do vary by neighborhood. And so we make a point of asking the community what's important to them. And then we customize the messaging in our marketing materials to address those barriers. And as part of the stakeholder outreach, we're looking to kind of get trusted partners on board who can help us get the message out to the community and are recognized by the community as a trusted source of information, and they help us identify any other local outreach channels we should be using to reach people. We are asking people to make a commitment. This is our pledge. We ask people to take a pledge to drive less. We're providing incentives to help them get started, and we're doing norm appeals as well. So we collect stories from from people who are participating in the program, and we share those with the general community. We collect stories from people who are car light or car free and share those with other participants and with the community. We share a lot of those stories via social media or via email newsletter, emails that we send out to participants every week throughout the project. So I'm going to walk through, Chelsea has some questions about the residential outreach and person-to-person connection, and I think I'm going to answer those questions in the context of the motivational interviewing that we did, because that is where we had a lot of person-to-person connection. So I think I'm going to hold that question until we get there, if that's okay. And she's also asking a question about how many people are on our team, and I just wanted to be clear starting out that we have a pretty small internal team. We have we have 4 different people who work on the InMotion program, but it's a portion of all of their time, and I would say we have about maybe 1.5 full-time equivalent people across those four people who are working on the program. And so we contract out a lot of the program implementation to consultants who we have identified as being qualified to deliver InMotion programs. So we have a roster of consultants that we've pre-qualified through a procurement process here, and we put a piece of work out to them to basically bid on. So okay, so that's that. So now I wanted to walk through some of the project development steps. So I'll walk through each of these in turn and talk a little bit more about them. But the basic steps are identifying which neighborhood we want to do outreach to, doing our community and stakeholder outreach, and we move into design of the program and the materials, and then into implementation, and finally doing a measurement to analyze results. So neighborhood identification happens kind of in a few different ways, but we have a couple of criteria that we like to keep in mind. We want to target areas where people identify as belonging or identify as being part of a community, and we want them to have some level of a travel network that they can take advantage of. So having some amount of transit service, some pretty significant level of sidewalk infrastructure, that sort of thing. We want people to be able to take advantage of some options that are available to them. Many of the neighborhoods that we've identified in more recent years have been linked to significant investments or changes in our transit service. And that's actually been really powerful because a change is happening, and it's a good opportunity to talk to people. And in that way, we're kind of fulfilling 2 goals. We are working to retain our existing riders, which is an important thing for us as a transit agency, and we're also working to get new riders. So once we've identified a neighborhood, we move into our community and stakeholder outreach process. And we do a lot. We identify neighborhood stakeholders through internet research, through contacts that we think that we already have, or talking to people about who we should contact. And so a lot of it is really kind of person-to-person outreach to try and figure out who the right people are to talk to. And we have a couple of different approaches. Sometimes we just set up individual interviews with people that are important stakeholders within the community, and we ask them about their impressions of what the barriers are to people using alternative modes of travel in their neighborhood. We ask them about what might motivate people to try it. We test incentives, the incentives that we're thinking of offering on those stakeholders, and we ask them about what they call their community, so we make sure that we get that right. It's really important that we are using language that they use in order to describe where they live. And other times we actually do set up community discussion groups where we invite as many people as we can to come and have a discussion about us. And some of those have been more successful than others, depending on the community. Sometimes we kind of get people who are already really active in their community, and if that's all that we get, then we're not really getting to a kind of broader subset of the community. So sometimes just the stakeholder interviews have been more successful for us. After we do our stakeholder outreach, then we're really moving into program design phase, where we're using that community input that we've received to develop the messages specific to that community. And we are working with any partners that we identified during the stakeholder outreach to, thanks Debbie for your question. So a stakeholder, yes, it can be an influencer or leader in the community. It can be a person who is a part of the local neighborhood association or works in a community organization that is located in the neighborhood. It can be the City of Seattle has neighborhood liaisons, so we often talk with them about who we should contact within the community. It might be someone who heads up the local blog, so they can be a stakeholder or have a good pulse on the neighborhood. So it really it can vary a lot depending on the community, but those are the types of people that we reach out to. Sometimes advocacy organizations can also be good if they're located within the community or doing a lot of work in the community. They can be good sources of information as well. And so once we, let's see. We are working with some of those stakeholders that we've identified to kind of develop some partnerships with them, and I guess some examples of, and the partnerships are really during that implementation phase. We're looking for ways to get the word out. So sometimes those partners can be local businesses, depending on the community. We sometimes have very engaged local businesses who are willing to donate gift cards, for example, as drawings during the outreach time period, or we have partnered with the local blogs, for example, to have them write articles that can be posted on the blog. We have worked with some advocacy organizations like pedestrian advocacy or bike advocacy organizations if they are based in the area to lead local walks or lead bike rides in the neighborhood to encourage people to try out this new behavior and to build some of that community and I guess inform people about what's available in their neighborhood if they don't already know it. And we're also, during this phase, really kind of customizing some of the key program elements like the pledge, if there are any changes that we need to make to that, or any finalizing what rewards we're going to offer. Our Orca card, our transit fare card, is really quite a popular incentive, so we've been offering that pretty consistently across our projects for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's highly valued. But we also have drawings, and those are primarily from local businesses, where we are encouraging people to track their trips and tell us about that changed behavior. So we offer weekly drawings for people who track their trips for gift cards to local businesses. And we are working on developing all the marketing materials. We are figuring out any prompts that we want to have. We have a tote bag that a branded tote bag that we often include in our projects. And we've also used safety lights for areas where people aren't feeling quite as safe. And we've used commuter mugs where carpooling is a better option for people. And then we're finalizing anything else that we need to do as far as evaluation. And here are some examples of some of the tools that we create. So we've recently been using a lot of photos of real people and trying to make them look as much as possible like it's a person that could live in your community. So the poster in the center is this really hip guy. This is a neighborhood, in a very urban neighborhood in Seattle called Capitol Hill, and it's very young and hip, and so we tried to use images that look like that community. And the image on the upper left is an image of an envelope, and so we have a branded envelope that we use because we want people to open what we send them, and so it's a little bit bigger than normal mail, and it's color and it's enticing, and so we think that really helps get people to take that first step of opening the mail. Debbie, I will talk about the maintenance of the behavior in a little bit, so I will answer that question. So then we're really moving into implementation of the program. We are getting the word out through all those communication channels that we identified. We are getting people signed up. We're getting their customized travel info packets out to them, and we're rewarding them for that behavior change. And then we're doing ongoing outreach and communication throughout the 3 to 4 month project time period. We send out weekly emails to let people to give people tips about getting around, to share those stories that I talked about earlier from other participants, and to remind them to track their trips. I wanted to share, I guess, some newer ways that or some kind of more maybe creative ways that we're trying to get the word out, and one of those are sidewalk stencils. So we just recently tried this past spring where our outreach staff went out and actually applied the sidewalk stencils, and so they had their Nice in Motion t-shirts on, and they were out doing the sidewalk stencils at very low cost. And it wasn't just having the sidewalk stencils there, but they were out in the community, and they had a number of conversations with people who were just curious about what they were doing. And it's just another prompt, another reminder for people. They're walking in the neighborhood, maybe they forgot to track their trips, and this is a reminder for them to do that, or they've been meaning to sign up, and it's a reminder for them. We've also done gas pump toppers. I think the jury is still out for me on whether people actually look at those when they're filling up their tank, but it's definitely hitting the right audience. It's hitting people who are driving. So we will decide whether we're going to continue doing that. When we have a good grocery store partner, we've done bag stuffers with a grocery store so that people are getting something when they leave the grocery store. And we, as I mentioned before, we have, maybe I didn't mention this actually, we have posters that we ask local businesses to put up in their business so people can be reminded when they're doing their shopping in the neighborhood about the program. And we've also been using a lot of geo-targeted social media, primarily Facebook, to reach people in our target community. And it's amazing when it's something that's really specific to that neighborhood, people get really excited about it, and some of our posts have really kind of gone kind of viral, and it's really fun to see the excitement when people see something about their neighborhood. So after program implementation, we go into kind of results measurement, and we are looking at those pre and post surveys that I mentioned. In our post survey, we ask that travel question, but we ask a lot of other questions about what motivated them to sign up, which incentives were the most attractive, getting into more detail around what behavior they changed, particularly around transit service and trips. and we look at the trip tracking data that we have, we typically see about, 25 to 30% of our participants tracking trips. So it's definitely not everyone, but for some people it's a valuable thing and a valuable reminder for them to keep working on their pledge. And Debbie, this will get to your question about the behavior maintenance. We have done what we call a legacy survey for a couple of our projects to measure that continued impact on travel behavior, and have seen some pretty powerful results, and I'll talk about it in just a minute about what we've seen from that. And then we also can look at the transit data from the Orca cards that we have distributed. So in this next little section of the presentation, I will talk about some newer ideas that we've been working on. One is the legacy survey that I mentioned. Another is our outreach to limited English populations, and then motivational interviewing. So these are kind of top line results from the legacy survey. The blue line is pre-program, yellow is post-program, and the green is the legacy survey. And so this is all self-reported data, and this data is looking at people it's panel data, so it's looking at people who responded to all three surveys, which is just about 300 people. And so we have to have really pretty large or high participation projects in order to be able to do this legacy survey. So we aren't able to do it for all of our projects, but we have a couple of others from this past spring where we're very high participation, and so we will be able to do another one of these and see if we see the same results. But the basic takeaway is that the bottom three bars are the drive alone bars, and what you can see is that the pre-program is at 42%, post-program is 32%, and the legacy is at 36%. So this was pretty powerful for us. We went back to them 18 months after the project ended and asked them this travel question, and they continue to report reduced driving 18 months following the end of the project. So this has been super powerful for our internal management and making the case to continue the InMotion program, and also it's been great to share externally as well that we're seeing a pretty significant reduction or a pretty significant retention of the behavior change. One area that we are still kind of figuring out exactly how to be super inclusive in our outreach is with limited English populations. And the amount of kind of non-English speakers varies a lot depending on the community that we're doing outreach to. But one project that we did in 2015, the demographic analysis that we did for that when preparing for that project showed that 22% of that, so more than a fifth of the population in these neighborhoods spoke Spanish, and so it really called for kind of a different approach. So we wanted to do more than just translate materials, which we had done in the past, and really make the materials culturally relevant as well, because sometimes a direct translation just doesn't work. So we worked hard to get second and third native Spanish speaker readers on our materials to make sure that things were reading correctly and made sense, and really worked hard to get the materials relatable for people. And then we also kind of took a different tack for our outreach strategy. We went to Latino grocery stores. We went to places where Spanish speakers gathered. So we went to the local grocery stores. We went to a tax service, actually, a Spanish tax service, because this was tax season, and we had set up a table and talked to people while they were in line waiting to get support with their taxes. And those were really successful ways of reaching people. We also partnered with some local Spanish radio stations, and had one DJ in particular who was very supportive of the program, and we had a live the radio station did live broadcasting during one of our events, encouraging people to come and sign up and that kind of thing. And that was just very powerful, and really improved our credibility with this population that we aren't always the best at reaching. So next I'll talk a bit about the motivational interviewing pilot that we did, and this was a door-to-door effort. The project was located in the Green Lake neighborhood in Seattle, which is an urban neighborhood, but mostly single-family households. And we reached out to just over 5,000 households, and I think that, Chelsea, this is going back to your question about the kind of person-to-person connection. Most of our projects are direct mail based, and so our only opportunity for that person-to-person connection is when we're out in the community at those events, like farmers markets or just other community events that we identify. And so we don't have a lot of opportunity for that direct connection. And so I think that this was our opportunity to make that connection and have those conversations with people. So I wanted to give you just a bit of background on motivational interviewing. Some of you may already be familiar with it, but it's really meant to be a conversation that's led by the participant, and it is not meant to be a place where the interviewer comes with set solutions to a problem. You're really kind of engaging in an open-ended or kind of open conversation, using open-ended questions to kind of help the participant come to their own solutions. And it really meets individuals kind of wherever they are on the behavior change continuum. So just a little bit more about some of the benefits. You're able to kind of fully customize the communication because you're talking one-on-one to the person. It encourages them to come up with their own solutions. It really exposes barriers through that conversation, and I guess one of the best things or most different things, I guess, about it is that we're not relying on our audience to contact us. We're making that first contact. So some of the lessons that we learned during this pilot was, and this I think Chelsea gets to your question around credibility, and it was that we really prepared the community for to welcome us, I guess. We put door hangers on all of their doorknobs a few days before the outreach team went and visited them, to let individual residents know that we were going to be out there. And we also contacted the City of Seattle, let them know that we were going to be doing this. We contacted the Department of Neighborhoods and the local neighborhood liaison to let them know that we were going to be out there. We contacted the police department, and we put an article in the local blog, and really did everything that we could to kind of raise the specter of this project. And that led to a lot higher receptivity. Now this community, the Green Lake community, is a pretty high income community. It's a safe community, and I think that in other communities we might have a harder time if there are concerns about safety, if there are concerns about, I don't know who's knocking on my door. I think would have a harder time, and so it's definitely good to think about those sorts of things when you're thinking about doing a door-to-door effort. And how thinking about how how safe your outreach staff are going to feel too, and that kind of thing. So those are important things to think about in project design. Another thing that we learned was that we needed to be flexible. So we had a pretty difficult time reaching people at their homes, and people just weren't home. And so the outreach staff really had to adjust their schedules to get to people when they were at home. So adjusting it to be a little bit later in the evening, and adding more weekend hours than we thought we would originally need to have. Training the outreach team is really important. So we provided a one-day training to the outreach team where they did a lot of practicing of motivational interviewing techniques. We actually worked with a consultant on this project. We worked with Steer Davies Gleave, who provided us with, who had done this kind of training before, and provided the training to the team. And once they got out in the field, the outreach team really used each other to improve the conversations they were having. So they would come back after being out for a few hours and talk through the conversations that they had and troubleshoot, talk about good conversations that they had and difficult ones, and just kind of figure out the best approach for the next time that they went out. And then the other thing that we learned was that we were able to kind of cater the conversation somewhat to the audience. There was a pretty significant segment of senior citizens in this community, and so when after a few of those conversations, the team got better at kind of asking the questions that and understanding the barrier. They really got better at understanding the barriers and then asking the questions that would kind of move the conversation toward both identifying those barriers and also identifying potential solutions. So I wanted to, I guess, give you a little bit of information on results, and the slide was a little bit confusing for the morning group, so I'm going to just explain it a little bit better, and I think for future presentations I might rework it a little bit. But so the targeted households were 5,300, so those are the total in all of them in the entire neighborhood that we did outreach to. And visited were people that we actually answered their doors. So 2,200 people answered their doors. So that tells you how difficult it was to actually get someone to answer their door. We visited households 3 different times and tried to mix up the different times of the day and different times of the week that we knocked on their door. And we were only able to actually get 2,200 people to answer their doors. Of those 2,200 people, we had 1,200 participating households. So we had a significant number of the people that we talked to participate. It was just really difficult to get people at home. So we're pleased with the number of, we had lower participation maybe than we had originally expected, but we were really pleased with the rate of participation that we got from the people that we were able to reach. So I'm going to move into results. Going kind of from the micro level to macro, we look at Orca card usage, and about 50% of our participants don't have an Orca card prior to participating in Motion. And getting Orca cards out in the community is really important to us as a transit agency. So this is a great thing for us internally, that we are actually getting Orca cards out into new people's hands. About 65% of the promotional cards are used, mostly during that promotional period. And about 15% of them are reloaded. And part of the reason maybe for that lower percentage reloaded is that we have a high number of people who in our region that get Orca cards from their employer, so either free or at a significantly reduced cost. And so they may be using that employer card instead, or they may just go back to an Orca card that they already had, because 50% of the people do already have a card that they've been using. At an individual level, based on the pre and post survey data, during a 12-week program, each participant reduces an average of 11 car trips. And on an annual basis, when we are using the legacy survey to kind of extrapolate out that change, we see participants reducing about 28 car trips per year. And overall impact from the last time that I did this analysis was when we had done projects in 36 neighborhoods. Annually, all of these participants reduce 637,000 car trips, and you can see kind of the corresponding other increases or decreases in use of gas and vehicle miles traveled and CO2 reduced. So we feel pretty amazed with that, and pretty proud of that. So, and that completes my talk. So I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Okay, well thank you very much for that, Sonny. I did hear this presentation earlier today, and I have to say I still got a lot out of hearing you doing it the second time. There's just so much richness and so much depth. It's such a comprehensive program. There's so much to take away from this and to learn about all the details of how it was handled. I have a question actually, if I can put it forward, and it has to do, it's sort of a two-parter. Because it's such a huge comprehensive program, and it involved rewards, and it involved you know, the motivational interviewing, going door to door, it involved door hangers, it involved Orca cards, T-shirts, the stencils. I'm wondering about the funding that was available for this effort, how much funding, if you can share, was needed to implement this, and also the question of our return on investment comes up, is how did you convince management that it was worth going forward with this, given the funding that was required and the results you were hoping to get?
Right, right. Well, so I think a lot of the way that we convince management, that we continue to convince management that this is a good idea, is by continuing to share those survey results as the best indicator that we have that we are impacting travel behavior, and we are continuing to impact it. So that's been kind of the most powerful. The other thing that's really powerful for our management is that we have applied for and have been successful in receiving federal grant, federal CMAQ, so that's congestion mitigation and air quality funding for these projects, and we use it for a lot of our projects. We've also used we've used some state Washington State grant funds that are focused in on transportation. We've also used some construction mitigation funding. So sometimes with large construction projects, the state identifies some money to be used for what we call transportation demand management, and that could be working with employers on past programs, or it could be something like In Motion, where we're doing residential outreach. So we've kind of had a diverse set of funding, but none of it is, I mean, one of the big issues with using grant funding is that there's no reassurance that it's always going to be around. So we are in, kind of a constant state of I guess a state of a little bit of uncertainty around whether we will get that next round of grant funding and that kind of thing. As far as cost per project or cost per household, we typically budget about $20 per household that we target. So, and we typically see about a 10% response rate. So if we kind of look at what that cost per participant is, it's about $200 per participant. So I think if we feel, and we've felt confident that the self-reported survey data is kind of the best that we have. So if we feel pretty confident in that, then spending $200 per participant doesn't seem like a lot for continued reduction in drive-alone travel that we see.
So the benefits of reducing the drive-alone travel are seen as being worth the investment of $200 per participant.
Right, right.
Okay, right, and management sees it that way as well.
Yes, and it's consistent with a lot of our goals. I mean, we want to increase ridership on our bus service, so that's kind of one goal that we have. But we also have a climate action plan, and we have worked hard to get the In Motion program and other programs like this that our group works on included in our planning documents, so that it's it's part of how we achieve those goals. And so we've worked to include transportation demand management in our long-range plan for our agency, and that's really, and In Motion is mentioned as one of the strategies that we use to gain ridership. So that's really powerful too, is just institutionalizing it so that it's just assumed that's what you do. To support, you put service out there and then you support it.
Right, and it dovetails with so many other things that I can see how that would fit in. I'm going to go to another question by Debbie DeLong, and she's wondering, which tactics do you think were the most effective as reported by people or inferred from other analyses? I'm not sure tactics.
Which tactics do you mean, Debbie? Can you tell us more about that?
Would this be interventions that changed behaviors?
Or maybe communication tactics. So in terms of signups, most people hear about us, setting the door-to-door pilot aside, but most people hear about us from our direct mail. And that continues to kind of be the main, or I guess a primary way that we get our participants. Our community events outreach is also, especially if we have staff that are just willing to really engage people, we get a lot of participants through our events outreach as well.
Okay. Andrea Soler is asking, how do they monitor and record feedback from motivational interviews? What kind of tracking did you use to keep track of the kind of responses you got?
Yeah, well, we actually used paper. So and I don't know, you could probably figure out how to use an iPad for this too, but we kind of used an old school method. With the outreach staff had basically a clipboard where they had a form that they filled out for each conversation, tracking what kinds of travel resources people were interested in, what mode of travel they were most interested in trying, where they noted their barriers and that kind of thing. And that's kind of how they then put together the packet that they delivered to the person a few days later. So that's kind of how the feedback part. So we did conduct a post-project survey, and some of that information was collected via phone, where we kind of asked kind of more customer service questions, if you will, around how the conversation went and whether it got them thinking about their travel behavior, and whether they I'm trying to remember what else. I'm also happy to share the final report from this project if you're interested in going into more detail around that piece, I guess. So I'm happy to share that with anyone who wants it.
Okay. And we have two more questions. Maybe you can answer these really quickly. The first one is from Chelsea Bicklin. Do you or anyone listening know of any 2017 opportunities, like events, where people can talk to folks from InMotion or other similar programs in person? Do you have anything on the horizon?
Do you mean like our staff, talking to our staff in person, or I guess maybe I'm not clear. We have two upcoming projects that we are targeting launch in late February or early March that will be focused. Actually, sorry, one project that will kind of cover two different communities, our Beacon Hill community and Mount Baker, which are just south of the I-90 highway. And so we will be doing active outreach in the spring of 2017. We're always in Seattle if anyone's in Seattle and wants to come talk to us. So I don't know if that, yes, we're watching presentations. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So I don't have anything on my schedule beyond this to do public presentations, but we're always willing to provide advice via phone call or something like that. If you reach out to me, I'm happy to schedule something if you have more specific questions. And we're also happy to share, all of our materials and everything.
And of course, if you want to have other people listen to this webinar, you can come back after if you're an ISMA member and listen to it with other people in the room with you at no charge. So that's another option if we're talking about that.
And maybe we can just finish with Debbie DeLong's last questions, which she says is a bit off topic and we are running out of time. So maybe this could just be a yes or no answer. Do you measure or see any spillover to other sustainable behaviors like increased recycling, reduced water usage, when you see people reducing car travel alone? Do you have any idea of whether
Well, this is one I'd love to go in more depth about, actually, because I love this idea. But no, we haven't measured any of this. But we have, we've tried to coordinate with public health on some of these efforts to kind of tie in the biking and walking aspect of it. But we haven't gotten very far on it, unfortunately. But I really like the idea of this kind of whole home audit idea where you could go into depth about all of these different kind of environmental behaviors and just, So anyway, I think that would be super interesting.
All right. Well, your presentation has been super interesting, Sonny, so thank you very much. The questions were interesting. The answers were interesting. I think this is a great topic, and thank you so much for all the work you put into doing this. And I will hand this back to Jay.
Thank you. Thank you both, and thank you to everyone who's participated. As you leave the webinar today, you will have an opportunity to fill out a short evaluation form, and we would appreciate it if you just take a few minutes to do that. We rely on your answers, and we don't have any other feedback from you directly. Our next webinar in this series is, just trying to click on it, there it is, Social Marketing for Policymakers, the Help Me approach with Nancy Lee in the United States in November. And this will be on sort of, there's the information alone, there's social marketing in the middle, and then there's sort of laws past that, and how social marketing is so cost effective in situations where you don't need to use laws or information alone won't work. So that's what we look forward to in our next webinar. And with that, I'd just like to finally thank Wynn, who's helped make these webinars an important part of ISMA's member offerings. Wynn, over to you. One more.
Well, Jay and Tamara, again, it's been a pleasure to be part of the webinar today. And, you guys make it seem easy, but I know you spend a lot of time on organizing the program, making sure that it works, and we all really appreciate it. Sonny, a great presentation, the second great presentation of today. We all loved it, and it's going to be a great addition to our archive of more than 40 different of these types of webinars which advance social marketing research, training, and practice. So thanks so much, Sonny. Can we have you back for another webinar in our future webinar series?
No pressure. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Thank
Great,
you.
thanks.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
And to our members, our participants in today's webinar, especially Andrea Soler, Karen Ginsberg, Chelsea Bickla, and Debbie DeLong, want to say thank you very much for your continued support and participation. We hope to see you at our next webinar, which is Social Marketing for Policymakers, the Help Me Approach with Nancy Lee, on November 17th and 18th. And remember, as members of ISMA, you can sign up for that for free. Just go to our website and make sure that you register. Until then, keep visiting the ISMA website, share your events on our calendar, and exchange resources with us, and keep up through our newsletter. Until then, this is the International Social Marketing Association, and we now conclude today's webinar.